Hansel and Gretel. A fairy tale from the collection Children's and Household Tales by the Brothers Grimm in its original version. Outside a large forest lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and break, and once, when great famine came to the land, he could no longer manage the daily bread. As he lay in bed at night, tossing and turning with worry, he sighed and said to his wife, "Sections, what is to become of us? How can we feed our poor children, since we have nothing left for ourselves?" "You know what, man," replied the wife. "We want to take the children out into the forest tomorrow morning, where it is thickest. Sections, we'll light a fire and give them each a piece of bread, then we'll go to our work and leave them alone. They won't find their way home again, and we'll be rid of them." "No, woman," said the man. "Sections, I won't do that. Sections, how could I have the heart to leave my children alone in the forest? Sections, the wild animals would soon come and tear them apart." "Oh, you fool," she said. "Then all 4 of us must die of hunger. You can only plane the boards for the coffins," and left him no peace until he agreed. "But the poor children will take me," said the man. The 2 children had not been able to fall asleep because they were so hungry and had heard what the stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now it's all over for us." "Hush, Gretel," said Hansel. "Sections, don't be sad, I will help us." And when the old people had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little skirt, opened the front door, and crept out. Sections, the moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles that lay in front of the house shone like so many lumps. Sections, Hansel bent down and put as many as he wanted into his little skirt. Then he went back again, said to Gretel, "Sections, be calm, dear little sister, and go to sleep quietly. God will not leave us," and lay down again in his bed. When the day dawned, before the sun had even risen, the woman came and woke the 2 children. "Get up, you lazy bones, we want to go into the forest and fetch some wood." Then she gave them each a piece of bread and said, "Here's something for lunch, but don't eat it first, you won't get anything else." Gretel took the bread under her apron because Hansel had the stones in his pocket. After that, they all set off together towards the forest. Sections, when they had walked for a while, Hansel stood still and looked back towards the house and did this again and again. "Sections," father said. "Sections, Hansel, what are you looking at and staying behind? Be careful and don't forget your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking after my white kitten. She's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." "Sections," the woman said. "Fool, that's not your kitten, that's the morning sun shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, had not looked at the kitten, but had always thrown one of the shiny pebbles from his pocket onto the path. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now gather some wood, you children. I will light a fire so that you won't freeze." Hansel and Gretel carried brushwood together, a small mountain high. The brushwood was lit, and when the flame was burning quite high, the woman said, "Now lie down by the fire, you children, and get some rest. We'll go into the forest and cut some wood. When we've finished, we'll come back and fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat around the fire, and when noon came, they each ate a piece of bread. And because they heard the sound of the wood axe, they thought their father was nearby. But it was not the wooden axe, it was a branch he had tied to a dry tree, and the wind was beating it back and forth. Sections, and when they had been sitting there for so long, their eyes fell shut with fatigue and they fell fast asleep. When they finally woke up, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How shall we get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her. "Just wait a little while until the moon has risen, then we will find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and went after the pebbles, which gleamed like new stones, and showed them the way. Sections, they walked all night and came back to their father's house at daybreak. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "Sections, you wicked children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you would not come back at all." But the father was glad, for it had gone to his heart that he had left them so alone. Not long afterwards, there was need in every corner again, and the children heard their mother say to their father in bed at night, "Everything has been eaten up again. We still have half a loaf of bread. After that, the song will come to an end." The children must leave. We want to lead them deeper into the forest so that they can't find their way out again. Otherwise, there is no rescue for us." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better if you shared the last bite with your children." But the woman listened to nothing he said, scolded him and reproached him. Sections, he who says A must say B, and because he had given in the first time, he had to say it the second time. But the children were still awake and had overheard the conversation. When the old people were asleep, Hansel got up again and wanted to go out and pick up the pebbles, as he had done before. Sections, but the woman had locked the door and Hansel could not get out. But he comforted his little sister and said, "Sections, don't cry, Gretel, and sleep peacefully. The good Lord will help us." Early in the morning, the woman came and got the children out of bed. Sections, they received their piece of bread, but it was even smaller than the previous one. Sections, on the way to the forest, it crumbled in Hansel's pocket, often stood still and threw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, why are you standing and looking around?" said his father. "Go your way. I'm looking after my little dove. She's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Fool," said the woman, "that's not your pigeon, it's the morning sun shining on the chimney above." Hansel, however, gradually threw all the crumbs onto the path. The woman led the children even deeper into the forest, where they had never been in their lives. A big fire was lit again, and the mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired, you can sleep a little. We'll go into the forest and chop wood, and in the evening, when we've finished, we'll come and fetch you." When it was noon, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had scattered his piece on the path. Then they fell asleep and the evening passed. Sections, but no one came to see the poor children. Sections, they only woke up in the dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, then we will see the crumbs of bread that I have scattered. They will show us the way home." When the moon came, they set off, but they found no more crumbs, for the many thousands of birds flying about in the forest and the fields had pecked them away. Hansel said to Gretel, "We will find the way." But they did not find it. They walked all night and another day from morning till evening, but they could not get out of the forest and were so hungry, for they had nothing but the few berries that stood on the ground. Sections, and because they were so tired that their legs would no longer carry them, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they got deeper and deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, they would die of hunger. Sections, when it was noon, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a branch, singing so beautifully that they stopped and listened to it. And when it had finished, it waved its wings and flew before them, and they followed it until they came to a little house on the roof of which it perched. And when they came very near, they saw that the little house was built of bread and covered with cakes. Sections, but the windows were of bright sugar. Sections, let us go to it, said Hansel, and have a blessed meal. I want to eat a piece of the roof, Gretel, you can eat from the window, it tastes sweet. Hansel reached up and broke off a little from the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel stood by the window and nibbled at it. Then a fine voice called out from the parlor, "Nupper, nupper, nation, who is tinkling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, the heavenly child," and continued to eat without being misled. Hansel, who liked the roof very much, tore off a large piece of it, and Gretel pushed out a whole round window pane, sat down and did herself good. Suddenly the door opened, and an old woman came creeping out, leaning on a crutch. Sections, Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they dropped what they were holding in their hands. But the old woman shook her head and said, Sections, oh dear children, who has brought you here? Come in and stay with me, no harm will come to you. She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. There a good meal was served, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples and nuts. Sections, afterwards 2 beautiful little beds were covered in white, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only acted in a friendly manner, but she was a wicked witch who lay in wait for the children and had only built the little bread house to lure them in. When she got hold of one, she killed it, cooked it and ate it, and that was her feast day. The witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but they have a keen sense of smell like animals and can tell when people are approaching. When Hansel and Gretel came near her, she laughed maliciously and said mockingly, I've got them, don't let them get away from me again. Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got up, and when she saw them both resting so sweetly with their full red cheeks, she murmured to herself, "This will be a good morsel." Then she grabbed Hansel with her skinny hand and carried him into a small stable and locked him in with a barred door. He could scream as much as he wanted, but it did him no good. Then she went to Gretel, shook her awake, and called out, "Get up, sluggard, carry some water and cook something good for your brother. He is sitting outside in the stable and should get fat. When he is fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain. She had to do as the wicked witch demanded. Now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman crept to the stable and called out, "Hansel, stick out your fingers, so that I may feel whether you will soon be fat." But Hansel stuck out a little knuckle, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's fingers, and was surprised that he did not want to get fat at all. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel was still skinny, she was overcome with impatience and did not want to wait any longer. "Heda, Gretel," she called to the girl. "Be quick and carry water. Hansel may be fat or lean. Tomorrow I will slaughter and cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister wailed when she had to carry the water, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks. "Dear God, help us," she cried. "If only the wild animals in the forest had eaten us, we would have died together." "Save your whining," said the old woman. "It won't do you any good." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out, hang up the kettle of water, and light the fire. "Let's bake first," said the old woman. "I've already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which the flames were already leaping. "Crawl in," said the witch, "and see if it's heated properly so that we can put the bread in." And when Gretel was inside, she wanted to close the oven and let Gretel roast in it, and then she wanted to eat it. But Gretel realized what she had in mind and said, "I don't know how to do it. How do I get in there?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough, you see. I could get in myself." Crawled up and stuck her head into the oven. Gretel gave her a push so that she went in far, closed the iron door, and pushed the latch forward. Who? Then she began to howl quite horribly. But Gretel ran away, and the godless witch had to burn miserably. But Gretel ran straight to Hansel, opened his hutch, and called out, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." Hansel jumped out like a bird from a cage when the door was opened for him. How happy they were! They fell around each other's necks, jumped around, and kissed each other. And because they no longer needed to be afraid, they went into the witch's house. There were boxes of pearls and precious stones in every corner. "They are even better than pebbles," said Hansel, and put what he wanted into his pocket. And Gretel said, "I want to bring something home too," and filled his little apron. "But now we want to go away," said Hansel, "so that we can get out of the witch's forest." But when they had been walking for a few hours, they came to a large body of water. "We can't cross over," said Hansel. "I can't see a jetty or a bridge." "There's no boat here either," replied Gretel. "But there's a white duck swimming. If I ask him, he'll help us across." Then she called out, "Duckling, duckling, there stands Gretel and Hansel. No footbridge and no bridge, take us on your white back." The duckling also came near, and Hansel sat up and asked his little sister to sit with him. "No," answered Gretel. "It will be too hard for the duckling. He shall take us over one by one." The good little animal did so, and when they were happily over there and had gone on for a while, the forest seemed more and more familiar to them, and at last they caught sight of their father's house from afar. They started to run, rushed into the parlor, and threw their arms around their father's neck. The man had not had a happy hour since he had left the children in the forest, but the woman had died. Gretel shook out his little apron so that the pearls and jewels scattered about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket. Then all their troubles came to an end, and they lived together in pure joy. My fairy tale is over. There runs a mouse. Whoever catches it can make a big fur hat out of it.